The gunshot that echoed through Rawhide, Texas, that September morning in 1878 was not what brought Owen Irving to hire a woman, but rather the deafening silence that followed when he realized he had not spoken to another soul in 3 weeks. Owen stood on the porch of his ranch house, watching dust devils dance across the dry scrubland that stretched toward the horizon. His cattle grazed in the distance, content and well-fed despite the late summer heat, but their presence did nothing to fill the emptiness that had settled into his bones like winter cold. At 28 years old, he had built something substantial out here, carved a life from nothing with his own 2 hands. But lately, the accomplishment felt hollow without anyone to share it with. The ride into town took him an hour, his bay mare picking her way carefully over the rocky terrain. Rawhide was not much to look at, just a collection of weathered buildings clustered along a single main street, but it was home to nearly 200 people, and that made it feel like a metropolis compared to his isolated ranch. Owen tied his horse outside the general store and stepped into the relative coolness inside, nodding to Mrs. Patterson behind the counter. "Morning, Owen," she said, her sharp eyes taking in his dusty clothes and the weariness in his face. "You looking for supplies or company today?" "Both, I suppose," he admitted, running a hand through his dark hair. "Getting mighty quiet out at the ranch. I was thinking maybe I could hire someone to help with the cooking and cleaning, free up some of my time for the cattle." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. "There is a woman just came into town last week, staying at the boarding house. Name is Victoria Anders. She has been looking for work, but—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "She is a strange one, Owen. Came in on the stage from Dallas. Did not say much about where she was from before that. Keeps to herself. Miss Hadley at the boarding house says the woman has not smiled once since she arrived." "Well, I am not hiring her for her smile," Owen said, though something about the description intrigued him. "Can she cook?" "Says she can. Says she can clean and mend too. She is younger, maybe 22 or 23, and she looks capable enough. Just quiet, real quiet." Owen found Victoria Anders sitting in the small parlor of Miss Hadley's boarding house, her hands folded in her lap, her back perfectly straight. She wore a simple gray dress that had seen better days, and her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun. When she looked up at him, Owen was struck by her eyes, a startling shade of blue-green that seemed to hold an ocean of sadness. "Miss Anders, my name is Owen Irving. I own a ranch about an hour outside of town. I am looking for someone to help with household duties. Mrs. Patterson said you might be interested." Victoria stood, and he noticed she was of average height, slender but not frail. "Yes, sir. I can cook, clean, and do laundry. I can mend clothes and tend a garden if you have one." Her voice was steady but flat, devoid of the warmth or enthusiasm most people would show when discussing potential employment. Owen found himself studying her face, searching for some hint of emotion, but her expression remained carefully neutral. "The work is not glamorous," he warned. "The ranch is isolated. You would see town maybe once a week at most. The pay would be room and board plus $20 a month. That is acceptable. You would have your own room, of course. I have a spare bedroom in the house. I would expect breakfast, dinner, and supper prepared, general housekeeping and mending when needed. I work long days with the cattle, so you would be alone much of the time." "That is acceptable," she repeated. Owen waited for her to ask questions, to negotiate terms, to show any sign of personality, but she simply stood there, waiting. "All right then," he said finally. "Can you be ready to leave tomorrow morning? I will come by at 7. "Yes, sir." He left the boarding house feeling unsettled. There was something deeply wrong with Victoria Anders, though he could not put his finger on what exactly. She had not been rude or inappropriate, but there had been an absence in her, as if some essential part of what made a person human had been carved out and left behind somewhere. That night, as Owen lay in his bed at the small hotel where he stayed when business kept him in town, he wondered if he had made a mistake. But loneliness was its own kind of burden, and at least with someone else at the ranch, even someone as peculiar as Victoria Anders, he would not feel quite so isolated. The next morning dawned clear and hot. Owen loaded Victoria's single trunk into his wagon, noting how little she seemed to possess. She climbed up beside him without assistance, settling onto the bench with that same careful stillness that characterized all her movements. They rode in silence for the first 20 minutes, the wagon creaking and swaying over the rough road. Owen found himself growing uncomfortable with the quiet and decided to make conversation. "How long were you in Dallas?" he asked. 2 months. And before that, Louisiana. Getting information from her was like pulling teeth, but Owen persisted. "What brought you to Texas?" Victoria was quiet for so long he thought she might not answer. Finally, she said, "I needed to leave Louisiana. Dallas did not suit me. I heard there were opportunities in the smaller towns." Running from something. She turned to look at him then, and he saw a flash of something in those unusual eyes, gone as quickly as it appeared. Yes, the honest answer surprised him. "Well, you do not have to worry about whoever or whatever it was out here. The ranch is far enough from town that you would see anyone coming from miles away, and I can handle myself if trouble shows up." "Thank you," she said, but there was no relief in her tone, no gratitude. Just that same flat acceptance. The ranch house came into view as they crested a low rise. It was a simple structure, built from local stone and timber, with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. The barn stood nearby, sturdy and well-maintained, and beyond that were the corrals and the endless expanse of grazing land. It was not much, but Owen was proud of what he had built. "That is home," he said, unable to keep a note of pride from his voice. Victoria looked at the house, the barn, the land stretching out in all directions. "It is very isolated," she observed. "Does that bother you?" "No. Isolation is acceptable." Owen helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk inside. The house was clean but clearly lacked a woman's touch. He had done his best to keep things tidy, but there was a starkness to the rooms that spoke of a man living alone. The main room served as both kitchen and sitting area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. 2 bedrooms and a small washroom completed the layout. "This will be your room," Owen said, opening the door to the smaller bedroom. It held a simple bed, a dresser, and a washstand. A window looked out toward the east, offering a view of the sunrise. "It is not fancy, but the mattress is good and the roof does not leak." Victoria set her small bag on the bed. "It is more than adequate, thank you. I will let you get settled. When you are ready, I can show you around the kitchen and the rest of the house. I usually eat breakfast around 6, dinner at noon, and supper at 7. Does that work for you?" "Yes, sir. You can call me Owen. Sir makes me feel old." "All right." She did not call him by name, though. She did not call him anything at all. Owen left her to unpack and went out to tend to the horses. As he worked, brushing down his mare and checking the other animals, he found his thoughts drifting back to his new housekeeper. There was a mystery there, layers of pain buried beneath that carefully controlled exterior. He recognized the signs because he had seen them before, in men who had fought in the war, in women who had lost everything to disease or disaster. Something had broken Victoria Anders, and she had learned to function despite the fractures. Over the next few days, Owen discovered that whatever else might be wrong with Victoria, she had not lied about her capabilities. She was an excellent cook, turning his basic provisions into meals that were not just edible but actually good. The house took on a new level of cleanliness. His clothes were mended with careful, nearly invisible stitches, and everything ran with quiet efficiency. But she never smiled. She never hummed while she worked. She never made small talk or expressed an opinion unless directly asked. She moved through the house like a ghost, present but not really there, and Owen found it more disturbing than comforting. On the fourth day, as he sat at the table eating a breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits that were better than anything he had managed to produce on his own, Owen decided to try something different. "This is delicious," he said. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother taught me." "Is she still in Louisiana?" "She is dead." The flat way she said it, without a trace of grief or emotion, made Owen's chest tighten. "I am sorry. That must have been hard." Victoria did not respond, just continued wiping down the counter with methodical precision. "My parents are both gone too," Owen continued. "My father died when I was 17 during the war. My mother passed 3 years ago from pneumonia. It is part of why I came out here, to start fresh somewhere without all those memories." "I understand," Victoria said, but her tone suggested she was simply acknowledging his words, not expressing actual understanding. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Owen found Victoria standing on the porch, looking out at the landscape. He joined her, leaning against the railing. "It is beautiful out here in the evenings," he said. "Yes. Back in town, I barely notice sunsets. Too busy, too many buildings in the way. Out here, you cannot miss them." Victoria did not respond. Owen glanced at her profile, noting the way the fading light softened her features. She would be pretty if she smiled, he thought. But the absence of joy in her face was so complete that it was hard to imagine what she might look like with any other expression. "Victoria," he said carefully, "I know it is not my business, but I want you to know that if you ever need to talk about whatever happened to you, I am willing to listen. No judgment." She turned to look at him, and for just a moment he saw a crack in her armor. Pain flickered in her eyes, raw and deep, before she looked away. "Thank you, but talking will not change anything." "Maybe not, but sometimes carrying things alone makes them heavier than they need to be." "I am used to the weight," she said, and went back inside. Owen stayed on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. He had hired Victoria to ease his own loneliness, but instead, he had brought a different kind of emptiness into his home. The silence she carried was deeper than simple quiet. It was an absence of all the small sounds that made a house feel alive. No laughter, no singing, no exclamations of surprise or delight. Just that constant, careful neutrality. But Owen Irving was nothing if not stubborn. He had built a ranch from nothing, had survived drought and harsh winters and cattle rustlers. If he could do all that, surely he could find a way to bring some light back into the life of one damaged woman. The next morning, he woke early and went to the barn before breakfast. He had noticed a nest in the rafters, and when he climbed up to check it, he found what he was looking for: 3 small kittens, their eyes barely open, mewling softly. The mother cat, a half-wild tabby that lived in the barn, watched him warily as he carefully picked up one of the kittens. He brought it into the kitchen, where Victoria was preparing breakfast. She looked up as he entered, her hands covered in flour from making biscuits. "I found these in the barn," Owen said, holding out the tiny kitten. "Thought you might like to see." Victoria looked at the kitten, and for the first time since he had met her, something changed in her expression. It was not quite a smile, not even close, but there was a softening around her eyes, a brief moment of wonder that broke through her carefully maintained walls. "It is very small," she said softly. "Born maybe a week ago. There are 2 more in the nest. The mother is doing a good job with them, but I thought you might enjoy meeting them." Victoria wiped her hands on her apron and reached out tentatively. Owen placed the kitten in her palms, and he watched as her fingers gently stroked its soft fur. The kitten mewed, a tiny sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet kitchen. "I have never held anything so small," Victoria said, and there was something in her voice, a hint of actual emotion that had not been there before. "You can visit them anytime you want. The mother does not seem to mind people much, as long as you are gentle." Victoria nodded, still focused on the kitten. Owen saw her thumb brush along its tiny head, and he thought he detected the faintest tremor in her hand, as if something long frozen was beginning to thaw. "I should take it back to its mother," he said after a moment. Victoria reluctantly handed the kitten back. "Thank you for showing me," she said, and this time the words carried actual meaning. It was a small victory, but Owen counted it as one nonetheless. Over the following weeks, Owen made it his personal mission to find moments that might break through Victoria's walls. He brought her wildflowers from the fields, arranging them clumsily in a jar because he knew nothing about making them look nice, but the gesture was what mattered. He told her silly stories about his adventures with the cattle, exaggerating his own clumsiness to make the tales more entertaining. He made a point of commenting on the good things, the beauty of a clear morning, the satisfaction of a job well done, the taste of her cooking. Victoria never laughed. She never even came close. But slowly, incrementally, he noticed small changes. She would pause when he told a story, actually listening rather than just waiting for him to finish. When he brought flowers, she would take time to arrange them properly, showing a care for the task that suggested it mattered to her. Once, he caught her standing in the barn, watching the kittens play, and there was something almost peaceful in her posture. One evening in October, as they sat on the porch after supper, Owen decided to push a little further. "Tell me something about yourself," he said. "Something that has nothing to do with work or the past, just something that is you." Victoria was quiet for a long time. The crickets sang in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to the moon. Finally, she said, "I used to read. Before. I loved stories, especially ones about people going on adventures to far-off places." "What kind of adventures?" "Sailing to exotic islands, exploring ancient ruins, meeting people from different cultures, things that seemed impossible for someone like me." She paused. "I have not read a book in a long time." "Why not?" It seemed pointless. The joy was gone from it. Owen considered this. "There is a bookshelf in my room. Not much, just what I've collected over the years. You are welcome to look through it, see if anything interests you." "I do not think I could enjoy it anymore." "Maybe not, but maybe trying is worth something, even if it does not work out." The next morning, Owen found one of his books on the kitchen table. It was a collection of Mark Twain stories, worn from repeated readings. Victoria did not mention taking it, and Owen did not ask. But he noticed she had it with her sometimes in the evenings, though he never saw her actually reading it. November brought cooler weather and the first hints of winter. Owen spent long days repairing fences and preparing the ranch for the cold months ahead. Victoria took to baking more, filling the house with the smells of bread and pies. They had fallen into an easy routine, comfortable in its predictability. One afternoon, Owen came in from working with the cattle to find Victoria at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. She was not crying. He had never seen her cry, but there was a devastation in her posture that made his heart clench. "Victoria, what is wrong?" She looked up at him, and her face was ashen. "It is the anniversary. I did not realize it until today. It has been exactly 1 year." "Anniversary of what?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The words seemed to stick in her throat, too heavy and terrible to speak aloud. Owen pulled out a chair and sat beside her. "You do not have to tell me if you are not ready," he said gently. "But I am here and I am listening if you want to share it." Victoria's hands trembled as she pressed them flat against the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I had a husband. His name was Thomas. We had been married for 6 months. He was kind and gentle, and he made me laugh. I laughed all the time back then, at his jokes, at silly things, at nothing at all sometimes. I was happy." Owen waited, not speaking, giving her space to continue. "There was a man in our town in Louisiana. He owned the bank. He decided he wanted me, even though I was married. He was used to getting what he wanted. When I refused him, when Thomas stood up for me, Her voice cracked. "He had Thomas killed, made it look like an accident, but everyone knew. Everyone knew, and no one would stand against him because he had money and power. God, Victoria, I am so sorry. I tried to get justice. I went to the sheriff, to the mayor, to anyone who would listen, but no one would help. They said there was no proof. They said I should be grateful he still wanted to marry me, that he could provide for me." She laughed, a sound so bitter and hollow that it made Owen flinch. "So I left. I ran to Dallas, but I kept seeing Thomas everywhere, in every man's face, in every laugh. And I realized I could not laugh anymore. It felt like a betrayal. How could I laugh when he was dead? How could I feel joy when the world had shown me how meaningless it all was?" Owen reached out and placed his hand over hers. "It was not meaningless. Thomas loved you. That was real. And what happened to him was evil, but that does not make the good things any less true." "How do you know?" Victoria asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her tone. "How do you know that any of it matters?" "Because I have seen you almost smile when you held that kitten. Because I have watched you arrange flowers with care, even though you thought no one was watching. Because you are still here, still trying, even though everything inside you probably wants to give up. That matters. You matter." Tears finally came, silent and steady, streaming down Victoria's face. Owen moved his chair closer and put his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, her body shaking with suppressed sobs. They sat like that until the sun set, and the kitchen grew dark, and Owen thought that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something. The weeks that followed were different. Victoria was still quiet, still careful, but there was a new openness to her. She began to talk more, sharing small details about her life before the tragedy, stories about her childhood and her parents and the woman she had been. Owen shared his own stories in return, telling her about growing up in Missouri, about his father's stern kindness and his mother's gentle wisdom, about his decision to come to Texas and build something new. They began to work together more, Owen finding excuses to involve Victoria in the ranch work. He taught her to ride, putting her on his gentlest mare and leading her around the corral until she found her confidence. She was a natural, sitting straight and easy in the saddle, and Owen found himself admiring the way her hair caught the light when the wind pulled it free from its bun. Winter came in earnest, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. The house felt warmer now, not just from the fire but from the life that had returned to it. Victoria still did not laugh, but she smiled sometimes, small and hesitant, like someone testing whether the ground would hold their weight. Christmas approached, and Owen made a trip to town to gather supplies and a few special items. He had never put much effort into celebrating holidays, but this year felt different. He wanted to give Victoria something, some marker that acknowledged the progress she had made. On Christmas morning, he presented her with a wrapped package at breakfast. Victoria looked at it with surprise, her hands hovering over the brown paper. "You did not have to get me anything," she said. "I know, but I wanted to. Open it. Inside were 3 new books, their spines uncracked and gleaming. Adventure novels, the kind she had mentioned loving before. Victoria ran her fingers over the covers, and Owen saw her eyes grow bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "This is too much." "No, it is exactly right. You said you used to love reading. Maybe it is time to try again." Victoria looked up at him, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. "I have something for you too," she said, and disappeared into her room. She returned with a shirt, carefully folded. Owen unfolded it and saw that she had made it herself, the stitching perfect, the fabric soft and well made. "Victoria, this is incredible. You made this." "I used to sew before, for extra money. I thought you could use a new shirt for going to town." Owen was touched in a way he had not expected. It was not just the gift, but the thought behind it, the care she had taken, the fact that she had been thinking about him enough to notice what he might need. "Thank you. I will wear it proudly." They had a special dinner that evening, Victoria making a feast from their winter stores. As they ate by candlelight, the house warm and cozy against the cold outside, Owen realized he was happier than he had been in years. Not just content or satisfied, but genuinely happy. After dinner, as they sat by the fire, Victoria opened one of her new books and began to read aloud. Her voice was soft but clear, bringing the words to life. Owen listened, watching the firelight play across her face, and thought about how much had changed in just a few months. "Victoria," he said during a pause in her reading, "I am glad you came here. I know it was not easy for you, leaving Louisiana and starting over, but I want you to know that you have made this place feel like a home." She closed the book, her finger marking the page. "I am glad too. When I first came, I thought I was just looking for a place to hide. But this has become more than that. You have given me something I thought I had lost forever." "What is that?" "Hope. The possibility that maybe life could be good again." Owen's heart beat faster. He had been falling for Victoria for weeks now. Maybe longer, but he had not wanted to rush her, had not wanted to push for something she might not be ready to give. But looking at her now, seeing the softness in her expression, he thought maybe she felt the same way. "Victoria, I need to tell you something. Over these past months, you have become important to me, not just as my housekeeper, but as a person. I find myself thinking about you throughout the day, looking forward to meals because I get to see you, making plans for things I want to show you or tell you. I think I am falling in love with you." "No, that is not right. I know I am falling in love with you. I have been for a while now." Victoria's eyes widened, and for a moment, Owen feared he had made a terrible mistake. But then she smiled, a real smile that transformed her face, and said, "I think I am falling in love with you too. I did not think I could feel this way again. I did not think I deserved to. But you have been so patient, so kind. You gave me joy when I thought it was impossible. You made me want to live again, not just exist." Owen crossed the space between them and took her hands in his. "I know there are no guarantees in life. I know bad things happen, and we cannot always protect the people we love. But I also know that the time we have is precious, and I want to spend mine with you, if you will have me." "Yes," Victoria said, and then she was in his arms and he was kissing her, and it felt like coming home after a long journey. The winter passed in a blur of happiness. Owen and Victoria made plans for the future, talking late into the night about their hopes and dreams. In February, on a clear cold day, they rode into Rawhide and were married by the circuit preacher in the small church on the edge of town. Mrs. Patterson and her husband served as witnesses, and half the town turned out to celebrate with them afterward. "I knew it would work out, Mrs. Patterson said to Owen as they cut the cake Victoria had made for the occasion. "That girl just needed someone to give her a reason to smile again." She gave me a reason too, Owen replied, watching Victoria talk with some of the town women, her face animated in a way he had never seen when they first met. Spring came, bringing new life to the ranch. The cattle had survived the winter well, and Owen's herd was growing. Victoria transformed the area around the house, planting a garden that promised vegetables and herbs for the coming months. She still had quiet days, times when the weight of her past seemed to press down on her, but they were fewer now, and she had learned to share those moments with Owen rather than bearing them alone. One evening in April, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Victoria suddenly laughed. It was a small sound, barely more than a chuckle, but to Owen it was like hearing music after years of silence. "What is it?" he asked, grinning. That calf over there just head-butted its mother trying to nurse, the expression on her face. Victoria laughed again, louder this time, and Owen felt his heart swell with joy. "There it is," he said softly. "I have been waiting months to hear that sound." Victoria turned to him, her eyes bright with tears and happiness. "I did not think I would ever laugh again. I was so sure that part of me was dead and buried with Thomas. But you showed me that joy is not a betrayal. It is a gift, and it is okay to accept it." "Thomas would want you to be happy," Owen said. "Anyone who loved you would want that. I know. And I am. Happy, I mean. Truly happy for the first time in so long." That night, as they lay in bed, Victoria told Owen she thought she might be pregnant. He held her close, his hand on her stomach, and they talked about what kind of parents they wanted to be, what kind of life they wanted to give their children. It felt like a promise, a commitment not just to each other, but to the future they were building together. The pregnancy was confirmed by the doctor on their next trip to town. Owen was jubilant, already making plans to expand the house, to build a proper nursery, to prepare for this new chapter of their lives. Victoria was more reserved, her joy tempered by the fear that something might go wrong, but Owen was patient with her worries, reassuring her with his steady presence. Summer brought heat and hard work. Owen hired 2 ranch hands to help with the cattle, giving him more time to spend with Victoria as her pregnancy advanced. She bloomed in the warm weather, her figure rounding, her face glowing with health and happiness. The garden flourished under her care, providing fresh vegetables that she preserved for the winter ahead. In July, Owen came home from town with a surprise. He had commissioned a rocking chair from the carpenter, made from smooth oak and designed for comfort. Victoria cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "For you and the baby," Owen explained. "I thought you would want somewhere comfortable to sit and rock them to sleep." "It is perfect," Victoria said, settling into the chair and testing its gentle motion. "Everything is perfect. I never imagined I could have this, a home, a husband who loves me, a child on the way. It feels like a dream." "It is real," Owen assured her. "All of it is real, and it is yours. We built this together." As autumn approached, they prepared for the birth. Owen made sure they had everything they might need, calling in favors to have the midwife from town agree to stay at the ranch for a week when Victoria's time drew near. He was nervous, more nervous than he had ever been facing down stampedes or cattle rustlers, but Victoria was calm, her earlier fears replaced by a quiet confidence. On a cool September evening, exactly 1 year after Owen had first tried to make Victoria smile by bringing her a kitten, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, but Victoria was strong, and when the baby finally arrived, his lusty cries filled the house with sound and life. Owen held his son for the first time and felt his world shift. The baby was tiny and red-faced, with a shock of dark hair and powerful lungs. "He is perfect," Owen said in wonder. "Victoria, look at what we made. Victoria, exhausted but radiant, smiled up at them both. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, but now, looking at his son, Owen knew exactly what felt right. "What about Thomas? To honor the man who loved you first, who would want you to be happy." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears, healing tears. "Yes. Thomas. That is perfect." Little Thomas Irving became the center of their world. Owen had never known he could love something so much, this tiny person who depended on them for everything. He would stand over the cradle for hours, just watching his son sleep, marveling at the perfection of his small fingers and toes. Victoria was a natural mother, patient and loving, but she was not afraid to laugh when Thomas did something amusing. And he did, frequently, making faces and noises that delighted them both. The house was full of laughter now, Victoria's and Owen's and eventually Thomas's own baby giggles. The ranch continued to prosper. Word had spread about Owen's fair dealings and quality cattle, and buyers came from as far as San Antonio to purchase from him. He was able to hire more help, to buy more land, to build the additions to the house that Victoria had dreamed about. They added a proper dining room, a larger kitchen, and 2 more bedrooms for the children they hoped would come. When Thomas was 2 years old, Victoria gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, after Victoria's mother. Rose had her mother's unusual blue-green eyes and her father's dark hair, and she was a happy, easy baby who seemed to find joy in everything. Owen would sometimes catch Victoria watching their children play, her face soft with contentment, and he would thank whatever power had brought this damaged, beautiful woman into his life. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. Thomas grew into a curious, energetic boy who loved the ranch and the animals. Rose was quieter, more thoughtful, but she had her mother's strength and her father's stubbornness. A third child, another son they named William, arrived when Thomas was 5, completing their family. The ranch expanded to become one of the most successful in the region. Owen's reputation for honesty and hard work brought him opportunities and friendships, and the Irving family became well respected in Rawhide and beyond. But despite their success, Owen and Victoria never lost sight of what truly mattered. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Owen gave Victoria a leather-bound journal. "For your stories," he explained. "You used to love reading about adventures, but I thought maybe you would like to write about ours." Victoria opened the journal, running her fingers over the smooth, blank pages. "Our adventure," she said softly. "From a woman who could not laugh to a mother who cannot stop. From a man alone on a ranch to a father with a house full of children." "The best kind of adventure," Owen agreed. "The kind where everyone gets a happy ending." That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Victoria began to write. She wrote about the darkness that had consumed her after Thomas's death, about the emptiness she had carried. She wrote about meeting Owen, about his patience and kindness, about the way he had made it his mission to bring joy back into her life. She wrote about learning to laugh again, to love again, to believe that happiness was not a betrayal but a tribute to those who had loved her. And she wrote about gratitude, for the unexpected gifts that life had given her, for the second chance she had not known she needed, for the cowboy who had looked at a broken woman and seen someone worth saving. Years turned into decades. The children grew up strong and capable, Thomas eventually taking over much of the ranch operations, Rose marrying a good man from a neighboring ranch, and William heading off to Austin to study law. Owen and Victoria grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces weathering with time, but their love only deepened. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, in the rocking chairs Owen had built for them, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Sometimes they talked, sharing memories and making plans for the future. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, content in each other's presence. "You remember when you brought me that kitten?" Victoria asked one evening when they were both in their 60s. "I remember thinking I would do anything to see you smile," Owen replied. "Even if it meant raiding every barn in Texas for cute animals." Victoria laughed, the sound as warm and genuine as it had been that first time she had truly laughed again. "You did not have to raid any barns. You just had to be yourself. Patient, kind, determined to see the good in everything. You taught me that joy is not something that can be taken away permanently. It can be buried, hidden, forgotten, but it is always there, waiting to be rediscovered." "You taught me some things too," Owen said. "You taught me that love is not just about being there for the good times. It is about standing with someone through their darkest moments. It is about giving them space to heal while letting them know they are not alone. It is about making joy a daily gift, even when it seems impossible." They sat in silence for a while, watching as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. The house behind them was quiet now, with just the two of them, but it still felt full, echoing with the memories of all the love and laughter it had held over the years. "I used to think my story ended when I lost my first husband," Victoria said quietly. "I thought the best part of my life was over, and everything after would just be existing, going through the motions. But you showed me I was wrong. You showed me that new chapters can be just as beautiful as old ones, that happiness can be found even after terrible loss, that laughter can return even when you think you have forgotten how." Owen brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "We showed each other. You gave my life meaning when I did not even realize how empty it was. You filled my house with love and warmth and the sound of children's laughter. You gave me a family, a purpose, a reason to wake up grateful every single day. I love you, Owen Irving. I loved you when I could not even feel love anymore, when I did not think I had anything left to give. I love you now, after all these years, after building this life together. And I will love you until my last breath. And I love you, Victoria. From the moment I saw you sitting in that boarding house, so sad and lost, I felt something shift inside me. I did not know it was love then, but I think some part of me did. Some part of me knew you were going to change my life." They sat together as the night deepened around them. Two people who had found each other when they both needed it most, who had built something lasting and true from loneliness and grief. The ranch stretched out before them in the darkness, solid and real, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. But the real achievement, the thing they were most proud of, was not the land or the cattle or the success. It was the love they had nurtured, the family they had raised, the joy they had chosen to embrace even when it would have been easier to give up. As the moon rose over the Texas plains, casting silver light across the landscape they had called home for so many years, Owen and Victoria held hands and remembered. They remembered the beginning, when neither of them knew what the future would hold. They remembered the struggles and the triumphs, the sorrows and the celebrations, all the moments that had woven together to create the tapestry of their shared life. And they looked forward, too, to whatever time they had left, determined to face it together with the same courage and love that had carried them this far. Because that was what they had learned, through all the years and all the changes. That love was not just a feeling but a choice, made fresh every day. That joy was not something that happened to you, but something you created, through small acts of kindness and determination to see the good even in difficult times. That a lonely cowboy and a woman who could not laugh could find each other and build something beautiful, something that would last long after they were gone, in the memories of their children and the legacy they left behind. And so their story ended not with drama or tragedy, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, a love well earned, and a happiness that had been fought for and won. The house stood strong against the elements, sheltering the next generation as it had sheltered them. The land continued to prosper, fed by the sweat and care of those who worked it. And somewhere in the vast Texas sky, among all the stars that had witnessed their journey, their love story was written, permanent and unchanging, a testament to the power of kindness, patience, and the daily gift of joy. Years later, when their children gathered to remember them, they would tell stories about the grandfather who could make anyone smile, and the grandmother whose laughter had been hard-won but all the more precious for it. They would talk about the love that had been evident in every glance, every touch, every shared moment between Owen and Victoria Irving. And they would understand that sometimes the greatest adventures are not about traveling to distant lands or fighting epic battles, but about choosing to love, to hope, and to find joy even in the darkest times. The ranch house still stood, weathered but strong, a monument to everything Owen and Victoria had built together. Inside, the rocking chairs sat by the fireplace, worn smooth by years of use. The books Victoria had loved lined the shelves, their pages filled with the adventures she had dreamed about. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the bread she had baked countless times, filling her family's home with warmth and comfort. And in the barn, descendants of that first tabby cat still made their home in the rafters, raising their own kitten season after season, continuing the cycle of life that had begun so many years before, when a lonely cowboy had brought a tiny kitten to a woman who could not smile, and started her on the path back to joy. This was their legacy, not just the material things they had accumulated or the land they had claimed, but the love they had shared and the lesson they had taught everyone who knew them, that no matter how dark the world seemed, no matter how deep the pain, there was always a possibility for healing, for happiness, for laughter to return. All it took was someone willing to make joy their daily gift, and someone brave enough to accept it. Their story was complete, their love proven through decades of commitment and care. And as the Texas sun rose and set over the land they had called home, it seemed to shine a little brighter on the Irving Ranch, as if celebrating the beautiful, hard-won happiness that had flourished there, a testament to the enduring power of love to heal even the deepest wounds and bring laughter back to the silent hearts.